Harold Brennan had rehearsed his little speech 3 times that afternoon. 40 years deserved something better than just passing the potatoes, he figured. The Red Oak Steakhouse smelled like charcoal and ambition, the kind of place where farmers came when their daughters got engaged or their sons made the honor roll. Outside the window, February snow fell thick and silent. Linda's phone buzzed on the white tablecloth. She was in the restroom, freshening up, she'd said. Harold glanced down at the screen without thinking much of it. A text from someone marked M glowed in the dim light. Room 304 is ready, same place, 8:30. He read it twice, 3 times. The words didn't change. Linda returned, saw his face, and went white as the snow outside. She didn't say a word, just grabbed her purse and walked out, leaving Harold sitting there with 2 untouched ribeyes and a small velvet box in his jacket pocket, containing pearl earrings he'd been paying off for 3 months. The drive home took 12 minutes. Harold didn't remember a single one of them. His hands gripped the steering wheel at 10 and 2, the way his father had taught him in 1958, and the windshield wipers beat their steady rhythm against the snow. He passed the First Methodist Church where they'd married, the VFW Hall where he still went for Friday coffee, Ed's Feed and Grain where he'd bought fence staples just that morning. 40 years of life in a 12-minute loop. The farmhouse sat dark when he pulled into the gravel driveway. Linda's car wasn't there. Harold sat in the truck with the engine running, heat blasting, watching snow accumulate on the fence line his father had built in 1952. Every post represented a promise. Harold's father had worked double shifts at the mill to buy this land, 200 acres of creek bottom and timber. On his deathbed in 2000, he'd gripped Harold's hand and said, "Keep the Brennan name on this land, son." Harold had meant to. He finally killed the engine and walked through the dark house to the barn. It was colder out there, but it was his thinking place. The smell of motor oil and old wood and 40 years of work. He sat on the cold tractor seat and pulled out his father's pocket watch. 1952 Elgin, worn silver, still keeping time. The metal was warm from being against his chest. Room 304 is ready. Harold tried to make it mean something else. Maybe Linda was planning a surprise. Maybe M was Margaret from her book club. Maybe there was an explanation that didn't crack his whole life down the middle, but he'd seen her face go white. He sat in that barn until dawn, running through the last 6 months in his mind like rewinding an old tape. Linda buying new clothes he'd never seen her wear around the house. Taking the car into town for errands that lasted 3 hours. Her phone always faced down on the kitchen counter. The way she'd stopped asking about his day. The wedding photo on the barn wall showed them young and stupid with hope. 1975. Linda in her mother's dress, Harold in his only suit, both of them thinking 40 years meant forever. When the sun finally touched the barn rafters, Harold heard gravel crunch. Linda's Honda pulled in slow like she was dreading the driveway as much as the house. He watched through the gap in the barn siding as she got out, smoothed her coat, and walked inside. Not sneaking, just tired. Harold gave her 30 minutes, then went in through the kitchen door. She was making coffee. The pot gurgled and spat, filling the kitchen, with a smell that used to mean morning and routine, and 2 people building a life. Now it just smelled like coffee. Linda, she didn't turn around, just kept spooning grounds into the filter, measuring careful like it mattered. "We need to talk," Harold said. "I know." "Where were you?" Linda's shoulders tensed. She finished with the coffee, pressed the button, and finally turned to face him. Her eyes were red, but dry. "I need time, Harold, to think." Time to think about what? About who M is? About room 304? Something flickered across her face. Surprise, maybe, that he'd fight. "It's not what you think." "Then tell me what it is." "I can't. Not yet." She moved toward the hallway, toward their bedroom. "I need to shower. I need to sleep. We'll talk later." "It's 6 in the morning. Where have you been for 9 hours?" Linda stopped at the doorway. When she looked back, her face had gone hard in a way Harold had never seen in 40 years. "I said later, Harold." The bedroom door closed. The lock clicked. Harold stood in the kitchen listening to the coffee pot finish its cycle and the shower turn on upstairs. Water running for a long time. Washing something away, maybe. Evidence. Guilt. He didn't know anymore. He poured himself a cup of coffee and sat at the table where they'd eaten 10,000 meals together. The pearl earrings were still in his jacket pocket, hanging on the hook by the door. He should return them, get his money back, but he just sat there, watching steam rise from his cup, waiting for his wife to come downstairs and explain why their marriage had ended at the Red Oak Steakhouse over a text message meant for someone else. By noon, she still hadn't come out. By sunset, her phone had buzzed 17 times on the kitchen counter, each buzz like a hammer tap on a nail. Harold never looked at it, didn't need to. He already knew. Linda came out of the bedroom 2 days later, with tears and an apology that sounded rehearsed. She sat across from Harold at the kitchen table. The same table where he'd waited, the same coffee pot gurgling its morning song, and reached for his hands. Harold let her take them, even though his fingers felt like wood. "It was a mistake," Linda said. Her voice cracked in all the right places. "A terrible, stupid mistake. Marcus means nothing to me." Marcus. So now the name had a face to go with it. "How long?" Harold asked. "It doesn't matter." "How long, Linda?" She looked away, toward the window where snow was still falling. "A few weeks, maybe a month." I wasn't thinking straight. I've been feeling old, Harold. Stuck. Like life was passing me by. Harold pulled his hands back. "So you fixed that by cheating on me?" I want to fix this." The tears came harder now, real or performed. He couldn't tell anymore. "We could do counseling. We could, I don't know, take a trip. Remember us. I made a mistake. But we've had 40 years, Harold. That has to count for something." It did count for something. That was the problem. 40 years was a lot to throw away over a text message in a hotel room. Harold wanted to believe her so badly it made his chest ache. He'd built his whole life on the idea that marriage was a covenant, not a contract. "You kept your promises even when they got hard." "No more contact with him," Harold said. "You end it. Today." "I will. I promise." "I want to believe you." "Then believe me." Linda squeezed his hand again. "Please, Harold. Give me a chance to make this right." So he did. God help him, he did. For 2 days, Linda cooked his favorite meals. Pot roast with carrots and potatoes. Apple pie from scratch, the way his mother used to make it. She asked about his day, laughed at his stories about Ed at the feed store, mentioned maybe they should update the will, make sure everything was clear for Tyler's future. She even slept in their bed instead of the guest room, though they stayed on opposite sides like strangers sharing a hotel room. Harold wanted it to be real, wanted to believe people could make mistakes and come back from them. His father had taught him that everybody deserves a second chance, that forgiveness was strength, not weakness. On the third morning, Harold was looking for the tractor insurance papers in Linda's desk drawer. He wasn't snooping, just needed the policy number for a call with the agent. But there, tucked under a stack of magazines, was a hotel key card. He pulled it out slow, like it might bite. "The Riverside Inn, room 304, dated 3 days ago." 3 days ago, after the anniversary dinner, after the tears, after the promises, Harold sat on the floor of her office with that little piece of plastic in his hand and felt something die. That was different from what had died at the restaurant. Hope died harder than love. He was learning. Love could take a beating and keep stumbling forward. But hope, once you killed it, stayed dead. He set the key card on the kitchen table and left it there. When Linda came back from the grocery store 3 hours later, it took 3 hours to buy milk and bread. She saw it sitting there and went still. For a long moment, neither of them spoke. Then she grabbed her purse and left again, without a word. The screen door slammed hard enough to rattle the windows. Harold needed fence staples. Needed something normal, something that made sense. The Riverside County Hardware had been in the same spot since 1947, and walking through that door usually felt like coming home. Today it felt like walking into a courtroom. He was in the back aisle, looking at wire and post caps, when he heard the voices. 2 women. He didn't recognize them by name, but he knew the type. Church ladies, probably, or the book club crowd. Their voices carried. "I heard it's been going on over a year. That developer, what's his name, Marcus Webb, came back to town, all high and mighty with his money. Poor Harold. Always the last to know, aren't they?" Well, what did he expect? Keeping her stuck out on that farm all these years. Linda's got wants, Harold's got cows, and one of them laughed. Not mean, exactly, just thoughtless. The way people laugh when someone else's pain is just gossip to pass the time. Harold stood there holding a box of fence staples, face hot, heart hammering. He could confront them, could walk around the corner and watch them go red with shame, could make it stop. But that would make it real. That would make him the man everyone was talking about. Poor Harold, the fool, the cuckold, the last to know. Ed Perkins appeared at his elbow like a ghost. The feed store owner must have seen the whole thing from the front counter. "Don't listen to hens, Harold," Ed said quiet. "Coffee?" Harold shook his head. Couldn't trust his voice yet. "My door's open," Ed said. "When you need it. You hear me?" Harold nodded once and walked to the counter. Paid for his staples. Kept his eyes down. Ed rang him up without small talk, which was its own kind of mercy. In the truck, Harold's hands shook so bad he had to grip the steering wheel for a full minute before he could drive. He sat there in the parking lot, watching people come and go, wondering how many of them knew, how many had been talking about him and Linda at their kitchen tables, shaking their heads, saying what a shame it was, what a fool Harold must be. He drove past the town diner on his way home. Linda's Honda was parked out front. Next to it sat an expensive-looking Lexus with dealer plates. Harold kept driving. His hands gripped the wheel like it was the only thing keeping him from drowning. Harold spent the next morning trying to find the tractor insurance papers. The policy was up for renewal, and the agent needed the account number. Simple task, normal life. He told himself he was just looking for insurance documents when he opened Linda's desk drawer. The manila folder was marked Property Documents Confidential in Linda's handwriting. Harold's hands went still. He shouldn't look. This was her private business, her desk, her papers. 40 years of marriage meant respecting boundaries. But she'd already crossed every boundary that mattered. He opened the folder. The first page was a preliminary sales agreement. Brennan Family Farm, 200 acres, creek bottom, timber rights included, to Web Development LLC. Harold's signature sat there at the bottom, bold and clear. Except it wasn't his signature. Close. Real close. Same general shape, same slant. But the pressure was wrong. The loops were too careful. Harold had signed his name 10,000 times. On marriage licenses, and mortgage papers, and Tyler's school, forms, and he knew his own hand. This wasn't it. He flipped through the stack. Property surveys. Appraisal reports showing the land worth $850,000. Development plans with colored drawings of houses and streets with names like Brennan Ridge Drive and Heritage Circle. Marketing materials promising luxury rural living. His hands started shaking. At the bottom of the stack were bank statements. An account at County Trust he'd never opened. Joint account, Harold and Linda Brennan, opened 8 months ago with a deposit of $50,000. Harold's parents had left them that money when they died, meant to be saved for emergencies, for Tyler's education, for the future. The current balance was $238, 8 months of withdrawals, cash, mostly. Small amounts at first, $500 here, $300 there, then bigger, $5,000, $8,000. The last withdrawal, 2 weeks ago, had cleaned out what remained. Harold sat on the office floor with papers spread around him like evidence at a crime scene. The winter light coming through the window was cold and thin. Outside, the fence line stretched into the distance. Every post driven by his father's hands, or his own. 3 generations of Brennan, sweat soaked into that land. Linda and Marcus were going to erase it all. Not for passion, not for love, for money. For condos and streets with fake heritage names and people who'd never worked a day on dirt. He gathered the papers carefully, put them back in the folder, and carried them to the barn, his thinking place. The smell of motor oil and old concrete and 40 years of maintenance. He sat on the cold floor and held his father's pocket watch, feeling its weight, hearing it tick. "I'm sorry, Dad," he said to the empty barn. "I might break that promise." The watch ticked on indifferent. Harold called a lawyer from his old flip phone, left a message with a secretary. Within an hour, Sarah Chen called back. "Mr. Brennan, you said it was urgent. I need to come in today, this afternoon, if you can manage it." Something in his voice must have convinced her. "I'll make time. Bring whatever documents you have." The law office sat above the hardware store in a building that used to be the old Masonic Hall. Sarah Chen was younger than Harold expected, maybe mid-40s, with sharp eyes and a handshake that meant business. She cleared space on her conference table and let Harold spread out the papers. She didn't say anything for 5 minutes. Just examined each page, occasionally making notes on a yellow legal pad. When she got to the signature comparisons, she pulled out a magnifying glass. Finally, she looked up. "This is forgery. Clear case. The signature's close, but it's not yours." "Can you prove it?" "Handwriting analysis, yes. It'll cost you, but we can prove it." And she tapped the bank statements. "This is worse, though. Joint account opened without your knowledge. Funds withdrawn systematically. That's financial fraud, Mr. Brennan. Possibly elder abuse if we can show you were deceived. Elder abuse." The words made him feel every one of his 68 years. How long will this take? Sarah's face softened. "I won't lie to you. Court cases move slow. Best case, 18 months. Maybe 2 years. And Mr. Webb, this Marcus Webb, he's got money. His development company can afford to drag this out, file motions, run up your legal fees until you can't afford to fight anymore. What will it cost me? $40,000 minimum. Maybe $60,000 if it goes to trial. Could be more if he fights dirty." She paused. "And juries can be unpredictable. They see an older man in work clothes against a successful businessman in a suit. Sometimes they make assumptions." Harold looked at the papers spread across the table. His whole life reduced to evidence exhibits. "My father bought that land in 1952 with money from working double shifts at the mill. He made me promise to keep it in the family. I've got 23 years of keeping that promise. I'm not stopping now." Sarah Chen nodded slowly. "Then we fight. But Mr. Brennan, you need to know. This won't be easy. Your wife has legal claim to half the marital assets. The forged signature helps us, but there's something else." Harold's throat felt tight. "That $50,000 they took? That wasn't just savings. My parents left specific instructions. Part of it was supposed to be for my grandson Tyler's college fund. They wanted their great-grandson to have an education they never got. Sarah's pen stopped moving. They stole from your grandson's education fund? Linda's his grandmother. Well, step-grandmother. I raised him like my own. Sarah's expression went hard. Theft from a minor's trust fund is a felony in this state. That changes everything. She made more notes. We can work with this, but Mr. Brennan, Tyler will find out. Court documents are public record. He's gonna know his grandmother stole his college money. And Harold thought about Tyler, 19 years old and away at community college, working part-time at a pizza place to help with expenses. The boy had called last week, excited about making Dean's List. Harold had told him how proud he was, how his great-grandparents would have been proud too. He hadn't told him the college fund was gone. He'll find out eventually, Harold said. Better he learns it in court than living a lie. Sarah gathered the papers into neat stacks. I'll start the paperwork today, but there's one more thing in these bank statements. She pulled out a page and slid it across the table. This account, the one marked Tyler Brennan Education Fund. You see the transfer history? Harold looked. His vision blurred a little. He'd need reading glasses soon, probably. One more sign of getting old, but he could make out the numbers. Regular deposits over 15 years. Small amounts, $200 or $300 a month. Everything Harold's parents had left, plus what he'd added himself. Total value last year, $47,000. Current balance, $238. Where did it go? Harold asked. According to this, your wife added herself as joint owner 2 years ago. Then systematic withdrawals over the last 8 months. Sarah's voice went quiet. Mirror, Brennan, this isn't an affair that got complicated. This was planned. Long-term planning. Harold folded his hands on the table to stop them shaking. What do I do? First, we document everything. Then we file. Then we prepare for war, because that's what this is going to be. She stood and walked him to the door. Mr. Brennan, one more thing. Do you have someone you can talk to? Family? Friends? Because this is going to get harder before it gets better. I've got my grandson and Ed down at the feed store. Good. Don't try to do this alone. Harold drove home in afternoon light that made the snow look blue. He needed to tell someone. Needed to split this burden before it crushed him. But Ed would be closing the store soon, and Tyler was 3 hours away at school, and Harold didn't want to burden the boy with news this heavy over the phone. So he went to the feed store anyway, needing supplies, needing normal. Marcus Webb was standing at the counter, talking to Ed. Marcus Webb turned when the bell above the door chimed. He was dressed like someone going to brunch in the city, expensive polo shirt, pressed khakis, loafers that had never seen mud. His Lexus keys dangled from one finger like a prop. Harold? Marcus smiled, the kind of smile that didn't reach his eyes. Good to see you. Harold stopped 3 steps inside. Ed was behind the counter, and his whole body had gone tense, ready to move if this went sideways. Marcus extended his hand. Harold looked at it like it was a snake. No. Marcus dropped his hand, still smiling. Fair enough. No hard feelings, right? Business is business. No business. That's right. Marcus leaned against the counter, casual, like they were discussing weather. Linda and I were looking toward the future. Your land? It's prime development property, Harold. You've been sitting on gold. 200 acres that close to town? With the highway access, you could retire comfortable. Real comfortable. Harold's hands curled into fists at his sides. Ed moved slightly, positioning himself. It's not for sale, Harold said. Marcus laughed. Not mean, exactly, just dismissive. Like Harold had told a joke that wasn't funny. Linda disagrees, and legally it's half hers. Community property state, you know how it works. She's ready to sell her half. And trust me, once the lawyers get involved, you'll want to settle. Litigation is expensive for Harold. Real expensive. I should know. I've got 3 lawyers on retainer. I've got one now, too. Something flickered across Marcus's face. Surprise, maybe. You hired a lawyer? Harold, come on. Don't make this harder than it needs to be. Linda wants out. You want dignity. I'm offering you both. Take the money. Buy yourself a nice condo in town. Spend your retirement fishing, or whatever it is you do. Whatever it is I do, Harold repeated. His voice had gone quiet, which was more dangerous than loud. I worked that land. My father bought it in 1952 with money he saved working double shifts at the mill. He died on that land. I promised him I'd keep it. Promises to dead people don't spend, old man. Marcus pushed off of the counter, checking his watch. Expensive. Probably cost more than Harold's truck. Look, I'm trying to be nice here. But if you fight this, you'll lose everything. Legal fees will eat whatever you'd get from the sale. And at your age, how many years you got left to enjoy it anyway? Ed's voice cut in. Marcus, I think you better leave. Marcus ignored him, eyes locked on Harold. One more thing. That development, it's happening, with your land or without it. Your neighbors to the south, they're already talking to me. If you don't sell, we'll just build around you. You'll have houses on 3 sides, traffic, noise, property taxes going through the roof because of increased valuations. You'll end up selling anyway, just for less money and looking like a stubborn fool. Harold took a step forward. Marcus's smile faltered. Get out, Harold said. I'm leaving. But think about it, Harold. Think real hard. Because this train is moving, and you can either get on board or get run over. Marcus headed for the door, paused with his hand on the frame. Oh, and Harold? Linda sends her regards. She's real comfortable at my place, says she should have left years ago. The door closed. The bell chimed. Marcus's Lexus pulled away with a purr of expensive engine. Ed came around the counter. You all right? Harold couldn't answer. His jaw was clenched so tight his teeth hurt. He'd wanted to hit Marcus. Wanted it so bad his hands were still shaking. 40 years of being a peaceful man, and he'd wanted to put his fist through that smug face. Coffee, Ed said. It wasn't a question. They went to Ed's back office, a cluttered space that smelled like grain dust and old coffee. Ed poured from a pot that had probably been sitting there since dawn. The coffee was thick enough to stand a spoon in, but Harold drank it anyway. He's wrong, Ed said. About everything. That land is yours. Half of it is Linda's, legally. Law's one thing, right's another. Ed sat in his desk chair, springs squeaking. Marcus Webb came back to town 6 months ago, all flashing cash. His daddy was Webb from Webb's Garage, remember? Fixed cars, drank too much, died broke. Marcus got out soon as he could, made money in real estate downstate. Now he's back trying to prove something. He's trying to steal my land. Yeah, and using your wife to do it. Ed took a long drink of coffee. Town knows, Harold. Everybody knows. They're not proud of it, but they know. That's what Harold was learning. Everyone knew. The hardware store women, Ed, probably Pastor Williams and the whole congregation, Harold Brennan, the fool, the cuckold, the man whose wife was living openly with another man while plotting to steal his inheritance. I'm not coming to VFW for a while, Harold said. The hell you're not. Friday, coffee, 8 a.m., same as always. You don't hide, Harold. Hiding makes them right. Harold stared into his coffee cup. I can't face them. Yes, you can, because you didn't do anything wrong. Ed leaned forward. Listen to me. You show up Friday. You drink coffee. You talk about the weather and the price of corn. You act like a man with nothing to be ashamed of, because you don't. Harold nodded, but he knew he wouldn't go. Couldn't. Not yet. He drove home as the sun set, painting the snow orange and pink. The farmhouse sat empty. Linda's car was still gone, probably at Marcus's place, wherever that was. Harold didn't even know where his wife was living now. He sat on the porch in his coat, watching the temperature drop. 15 degrees, then 12. The cold didn't bother him much anymore. Nothing did. That was the problem. He was going numb inside, and numb was dangerous. Numb was how men gave up. His father's pocket watch sat in his palm. Harold wound it out of habit, listening to it tick. 3 generations of promises in that watch. His grandfather had carried it. His father, now him. Supposed to go to Tyler next, but what was the point? There'd be no land to pass down, no farm. Just a story about how the Brennans had owned something once, before they lost it to a developer and a faithless wife. Harold took the watch off its chain and set it on the porch rail. Just set it there, ticking in the cold. He didn't put it back in his pocket, didn't wind it again, just left it there and went inside to a house that didn't feel like home anymore. 3 days passed. Harold stopped going to church. Didn't answer when Ed called. Didn't respond when Tyler texted asking how he was doing. He sat on that porch in the cold for hours each day, watching the fence line, watching snow fall, watching nothing. The pocket watch stayed on the rail, ticking down. Some men break loud with rage and violence and broken furniture. Harold was breaking quiet, and quiet breaks are more dangerous because nobody sees them until it's too late. On the morning of the 4th day, Harold sat on the porch at dawn, staring at the watch. The metal had frosted over. He should bring it inside, should wind it, should do something. He didn't move. The sun came up cold and white. Harold's breath made clouds in the air. His hands had gone numb in his gloves. He'd been out here since 4 a.m., maybe longer. Time didn't mean much anymore. Movement caught his eye. Across the snowy field that separated his property from the Hutchins place, someone was walking. A figure in a heavy coat carrying something. Nora Hutchins, his neighbor, 71 years old if she was a day, crossing a frozen field in the early morning with a thermos in one hand and a manila envelope in the other. She climbed his porch steps without asking permission, sat in the second rocker without being invited, and poured coffee into 2 cups she'd brought. Set the envelope on Harold's lap. Your daddy would want you to fight, she said. Her voice was rough from the cold and from years of not mincing words. I got pictures. I got dates. I got receipts. Harold looked at the envelope but didn't open it. Nora sipped her coffee, waited. Why? Harold finally asked. Because 30 years ago, my husband left me for a younger woman, took half of everything I'd worked for, and nobody said a word. Nobody helped. They all just watched and whispered. She set her cup down. I'm too old to watch it happen again without doing something. Harold opened the envelope with stiff fingers. Photographs, dozens of them. Linda's car at Marcus's rental house, time-stamped. Marcus's Lexus at the farm when Harold was at the VFW. Hotel receipts pulled from Linda's trash. 8 different dates over 4 months. A timeline written in Nora's neat handwriting, documenting every coming and going. How long have you been watching? 8 weeks, since I noticed the pattern. Nora refilled his coffee. Some folks think silence means we don't see. We see everything. We're just invisible because we're old. Harold looked at the evidence. Real evidence. Dated, documented, usable. His lawyer could use this. Call Sarah Chen, Nora said. Give her this. And Harold? She stood, gathering her thermos. Put your daddy's watch back on. You're not done yet. She walked back across the field, footprints dark in the fresh snow. Harold sat holding the envelope, holding the coffee that was still warm. The sun was fully up now, and somewhere down the road a truck was starting, and the world was moving, whether he moved with it or not. He picked up his father's watch, brushed the frost off, put it back in his pocket where it belonged. Then he went inside and called his lawyer. Sarah Chen called back within 2 hours. Mr. Brennan, this evidence your neighbor collected. It's solid. Dates, times, photographs with metadata. This helps considerably. Papers rustled on her end. But we need to discuss something. Marcus Webb filed a petition with the town council. They're holding a public hearing in 2 weeks about rezoning your property for residential development. Harold's stomach dropped. Can he do that? If your wife signs off as co-owner, yes. And even if she doesn't, he can petition based on adjacent properties. He's been busy, Mr. Brennan. He's already got preliminary commitments from your southern neighbors. If the council approves rezoning, your property value changes, your taxes triple, and suddenly selling becomes your only option. So I've got 2 weeks. We've got 2 weeks, Sarah corrected. I'll prepare your case. You'll need to speak at the hearing, present evidence of fraud. It won't be comfortable. This will be public. Everyone in town will know the details. They already know. Knowing and hearing it in a formal setting are different things. Are you prepared for that? Harold looked out his kitchen window at the fence line. I don't have a choice. After he hung up, Harold made himself eat something. Scrambled eggs that tasted like cardboard. Toast he couldn't finish. He was losing weight he couldn't afford to lose. The bathroom mirror showed a man who looked older than 68, hollow-eyed, unshaven, shrinking. He should go to the VFW. Ed had been right about that. Hiding made them right, but Harold couldn't make himself move. At the First Methodist Church, Pastor Williams was reviewing attendance records when his secretary brought him coffee. Harold Brennan missed again, she said. 3rd Sunday in a row. Pastor Williams frowned. Harold had missed church exactly twice in 20 years. Once when he had the flu bad enough to hospitalize him, once when his father died. 3 consecutive absences meant something was deeply wrong. I'll call him. I tried yesterday. He didn't pick up. Pastor Williams stood, grabbing his coat. Then I'll go see him. He called Ed Perkins on the way to his truck. You seen Harold lately? Not since Marcus confronted him at my store 4 days ago. I've been calling. He won't answer. I'm heading out there now. Wait for me, Ed said. I'm coming too. And they discussed Harold's situation on the drive out, what they knew from town gossip, what they'd pieced together, what they suspected. By the time they pulled into Harold's driveway, both men had the same worry etched on their faces. Harold's truck was there. Lights were off in the house. No smoke from the chimney, even though it was 20 degrees. They found him on the porch, still in his coat, sitting in the rocker, staring at nothing. He didn't turn when they climbed the steps. Harold, Pastor Williams said, well, go home. Can't do that. Ed sat in the other rocker without being invited. How long you been out here? Don't know. Don't care. Pastor Williams leaned against the porch rail, studying Harold's face. He'd seen this look before in Vietnam, in Marines, who'd taken one hit too many and were just waiting for the next one to finish the job. Combat fatigue, shell shock, whatever you wanted to call it, it was dangerous. When's the last time you ate? Harold didn't answer. When's the last time you slept? Still nothing. Ed and Pastor Williams exchanged a look. This was worse than they'd thought. Harold, listen to me, Pastor Williams said. You're not the first man to go through something like this. And I know right now it feels like the end of everything, but it's not. You don't know what it feels like. You're right. I don't, but I know what giving up looks like, and I'm looking at it. Harold finally turned his head. Then you better leave before you catch it. Ed stood, walked to the door. I'm making coffee. You're going to drink it. Then we're going to talk. I don't want to talk. Tough. Ed disappeared inside. Pastor Williams sat in Ed's abandoned rocker. For a long time, neither man spoke. That was one thing about male friendship. Sometimes silence said more than words. My father made me promise, Harold said eventually. His voice was rough, like he hadn't used it in days. Keep the Brennan name on this land. That was the last thing he said to me. And I'm going to break it. You haven't broken it yet. I will. The lawyer says, even if I win, the legal fees will bankrupt me. Marcus has 3 lawyers. I have 1. He's got money to drag this out for years. I've got, Harold gestured at the frozen farm, this, and half of it isn't even mine anymore. So you're going to quit? I'm being realistic. You're being scared. And Pastor Williams said it, gently, but said it. There's a difference. Ed came back with 3 cups of coffee, steam rising in the cold air. He handed one to Harold, who took it automatically, but didn't drink. Town council meeting is in 2 weeks, Ed said. Marcus is planning to pack it with people who want the development. Jobs, tax revenue, progress. You know how he'll spin it. Let him. You're not going to fight? Harold looked at the coffee in his hands. What's the point? I've got evidence Linda was cheating. So what? That doesn't stop the rezoning. Doesn't stop Marcus from building around me. Doesn't stop my taxes from tripling. Doesn't put back the money they stole. It puts you on record, Pastor Williams said, as a man who stood up, as someone who didn't roll over. For what? So I can lose with dignity instead of losing quiet? Either way, I lose. Ed sat forward. You know what your father would say right now? Don't. He'd say Brennan's don't quit. He'd say a man's word is worth more than his comfort. He'd say, he's dead. Harold's voice cracked. He's dead and buried, and he doesn't have to watch me lose everything he worked for. He doesn't have to stand in a town hall and admit his wife was screwing around, stealing from him, forging his name on legal documents. He doesn't have to be the fool everyone whispers about. The words hung in the cold air. Pastor Williams let the silence settle, then spoke. You're right. He doesn't. You do. And that's harder. Way harder. But Harold, if you quit now, what does that teach Tyler? Harold's head snapped up. Tyler's watching, Pastor Williams continued. Watching how you respond when life kicks you in the teeth. Watching what you do when the deck is stacked against you. You quit now. That's the lesson he learns. When things get hard, you fold. Tyler's at college. He doesn't need to know about this. He already knows something's wrong. Kids aren't stupid. And he's going to find out about the college fund eventually. When he does, what story do you want to tell him? That you fought for what was right? Or that you gave up because it was too hard? Harold stared into his coffee. The steam had stopped rising. It was going cold. Ed pulled something from his pocket, a folded piece of paper. Tyler called the store yesterday, asked if you were okay, said you haven't been returning his texts. He's worried, Harold. Wants to come home. I told him not to. He's got midterms. He's coming anyway. Spring break starts Friday. Said he's spending it here, helping with the farm. Ed unfolded the paper, a text message he'd printed out. Said, and I quote, Grandpa taught me, a man doesn't abandon family when things get tough. And that's what you taught him, Harold. Now you've got to live it. The 3 men sat in the cold. Harold's coffee had gone lukewarm. He took a drink anyway, felt it burn all the way down, bitter and necessary. The hearing's in 2 weeks, Harold said finally. 2 weeks, Pastor Williams confirmed. I'll need to speak, present evidence, tell the whole town my wife cheated on me, stole from me, forged my signature. Yes, they'll look at me like I'm pathetic. Some will, Ed said. Others will see a man standing up for what's right. And Harold, those are the ones who matter. Harold drank the rest of his coffee, cold as it was, set the cup down, looked at his 2 friends sitting on his porch on a frozen morning when they should have been warm in their own homes. I'll need help, he said quietly. You've got it, Ed said immediately. Pastor Williams nodded. Whatever you need. Harold pulled out his father's pocket watch, checked the time. Tyler gets in Friday evening. We've got 5 days to prepare before he gets here. I don't want him seeing me like this. Then let's get to work. Ed stood, collected the coffee cups. First thing, you're eating a real meal. Second thing, you're showering. Third thing, we start building your case for that council meeting. Harold looked at the fence line stretching into the distance. Posts his father had driven, wire he'd strung himself. Land that had held 3 generations of Brennan promises. He wasn't done yet. Maybe he'd lose. Maybe Marcus and Linda would win. Maybe in a year he'd be living in a rented apartment in town. watching bulldozers tear down his father's barn, but if he went down, he'd go down fighting. And Tyler would see a grandfather who stood up, even when standing was the hardest thing he'd ever done. "All right," Harold said, standing. His legs were stiff from hours of sitting in the cold. "Let's do this." The three men went inside, and for the first time in days, the farmhouse didn't feel quite so empty. The next 5 days passed in a blur of preparation. Ed brought groceries without being asked, actual food, not just coffee and frozen dinners. Pastor Williams stopped by each evening to review Harold's statement for the council meeting, helping him organize the evidence, figure out what to say and what to leave unsaid. Harold started eating again, started sleeping more than 2 hours at a stretch, started to feel like a man with a purpose instead of a victim waiting for the final blow. Sarah Chin called daily with updates. Marcus had 3 council members in his pocket, she said. They'd need 4 votes to block the rezoning. It would be close. "But Harold," she added, "your neighbor's documentation is powerful. And if you can stand up there and tell your story with dignity, not anger, not bitterness, just truth, you've got a chance." Dignity. That word kept coming up, like it was the only thing he had left to lose. Friday evening, Tyler's truck pulled into the driveway just as the sun was setting. Harold was on the porch, had been watching the road for an hour. The boy, no, not a boy anymore, a young man, climbed out wearing his college sweatshirt under a work coat. Tyler walked up the porch steps and stopped, really looking at Harold. His face showed concern, then determination. "You look like hell, Grandpa." "Feel like it too." And Tyler set his backpack down. "What needs fixing first? Not what happened, or tell me everything, or are you okay? Just what needs fixing?" Harold felt something in his chest crack open. "Fence line's got 3 posts that need replacing. Been putting it off. Let's do it." They worked until dark, Tyler asking no questions, Harold offering no explanations. Just the rhythm of post hole diggers and sledgehammers and wire cutters, the language of men who communicated through labor. When they finally came inside, Tyler made sandwiches while Harold showered. Over dinner, just bologna and cheese. But it tasted better than anything Harold had eaten in weeks. Tyler finally spoke. "Ed called me. Told me some of what's going on." Harold set down his sandwich. "How much?" "Enough. Grandma and that developer. The land, the legal stuff." Tyler's jaw tightened. "Ed didn't mention my college fund." So the boy knew. Harold had been dreading this moment. "Tyler, is it true? Did she steal the money great-grandpa and great-grandma left for my education?" Harold couldn't lie. "Yes." Tyler's hands clenched into fists on the table. For a long moment he just sat there, breathing hard through his nose. When he spoke again, his voice was carefully controlled. "How much?" $47,000? "They'd been saving since you were born. Your great-grandparents worked their whole lives, so their great-grandson could have opportunities they never got. And Grandma took it. She and Marcus, the account was drained over 8 months. Tyler stood abruptly, walked to the window, stared out at nothing. Harold waited. This was the moment Tyler could choose sides. Linda was his grandmother, even if only by marriage. Blood ties were complicated. Finally, Tyler turned around. "I'm with you, Grandpa. Whatever you need." The relief nearly knocked Harold over. "Son, this is going to get ugly. The town council meeting next week. It'll be public. Everyone will know the details. Your grandmother will be there. Marcus, too." "Good. They should see what they're doing to you." Tyler came back to the table, sat down hard. "Grandpa, you taught me a man keeps his word. You made a promise to great-grandpa about this land. I'm helping you keep it." Harold reached across the table. Tyler gripped his hand, callous now from work, not soft like it used to be, the handshake of men. "There's more you should know," Harold said. "The lawyer says even if we win, the legal fees could bankrupt me. I might lose the land anyway, just slower. Then we'll figure something out. I'm transferring to community college, closer to home." "Tyler, no. Your education can continue here. It's cheaper anyway, and I can work, help with the farm." Tyler's voice was firm. "You raised me, Grandpa. When my real dad left and Mom was a mess, you were the one who taught me to drive, taught me to work, taught me what being a man actually means. I'm not abandoning you because things got hard." Harold had to look away. His eyes were burning. "Besides," Tyler added, "Mom needs to learn you don't get to steal from people and face no consequences, even if she's my grandmother." They finished eating in comfortable silence. After dinner, Tyler did the dishes without being asked. When he was done, he turned to Harold. "What time's the council meeting?" "Tuesday, 7 o'clock. "I'm coming." You don't have to." "I'm coming," Tyler repeated. "You stand up there and tell the truth. I'll be standing right beside you. They need to see you're not alone." Saturday morning, Dale Rutherford's pickup appeared in the driveway. Dale was 69, Vietnam vet, lived on disability and worked part-time at the hardware store. He'd served with Harold in 71 and 72, Same unit, same firefights, same nightmares afterward. Dale got out carrying a toolbox. Ed said your barn door's been sticking. Harold blinked. It's been sticking for 2 years. Then it's about time someone fixed it. Dale headed for the barn without waiting for permission. Harold and Tyler joined him. The three of them spent the morning replacing hinges, planing down the door where it had swollen, oiling the track. Dale didn't mention Linda or Marcus or the council meeting, just worked steady and quiet, the way he'd always worked. At lunch, sitting in the barn with sandwiches and thermoses of coffee, Dale finally spoke. Council meeting Tuesday. Yeah, I'll be there. Dale, you don't need to... I'll be there, Dale said flatly. We don't abandon position. You taught me that. Firebase Delta, remember? When everyone wanted to pull back, you said we hold. We held. We're holding now? Tyler looked between them, understanding something about his grandfather he'd never fully grasped before. That afternoon, Pastor Williams arrived with unexpected news. Harold, I need to tell you something. They sat on the porch, watching Tyler and Dale work on the fence. About my background. Before I became a pastor, I practiced law. Harold stared at him. You're a lawyer? Was. JAG officer in the Marines for 12 years. Handled fraud cases, property disputes, even some forgery cases like yours. Pastor Williams pulled out his wallet, showed Harold an old military ID that listed him as Captain Williams, Judge Advocate General Corps. Why didn't you mention this before? Because you needed to decide to fight first. Needed to find your own resolve. Now that you have, I can help strategically. He leaned forward. Harold, I've been reviewing your case. Marcus Webb made mistakes, sloppy ones. The forgery is obvious, the financial fraud is documented, and the theft from Tyler's education fund adds felony charges. Sarah Chen said we might not win. Sarah's being appropriately cautious, but she doesn't know what I know. Pastor Williams smiled slightly. At the council meeting, when I speak, and I will speak, I'm not just giving moral opinion, I'm giving legal analysis. Marcus won't be expecting that. Harold felt something shift. You're going to stand up for me? I'm going to stand up for truth. And Harold, I've called someone. County Prosecutor Davis. We serve together in the course. He's going to attend the meeting, just to observe, officially. But his presence will send a message. This isn't just a civil property dispute. There are criminal implications here. The pieces were falling into place. Harold wasn't fighting alone. He had Ed's community connections, Dale's veteran solidarity, Pastor Williams's legal expertise, Tyler's generational support, and Nora's documented evidence. Sunday morning, Harold went back to church for the first time in 3 weeks. People noticed. Some avoided eye contact. Others nodded with respect. After the service, 12 people came up to him, some he knew well, some just acquaintances, and said quiet words of support. We're with you, Harold. That developer's got no business here. You need anything, you call. By Tuesday morning, Harold's kitchen table looked like a war room. Evidence folders organized, timeline printed and laminated, Sarah Chen's notes color-coded, Pastor Williams's legal precedents highlighted, Nora's photographs arranged in chronological order. Tyler made breakfast. Eggs, bacon, toast, the whole spread. Eat, he ordered. You need your strength. Harold ate. For the first time in weeks, food actually tasted like something. At 6:30, they started getting ready. Harold put on his best clothes. Not a suit, he didn't own one, but clean work pants, a pressed button-down shirt, his good boots, Tyler wore similar. Both looked like what they were. Working men with nothing to hide. Dale arrived wearing his old army jacket, the one with his unit patch still sewn on. Ed pulled up in his truck wearing his Sunday clothes. Pastor Williams came in his truck, a leather briefcase in hand that Harold had never seen before. Nora Hutchins crossed the field one more time, carrying a folder. Brought extra copies, she said, in case they try to claim the evidence was manufactured. At 6:45, the convoy of trucks left Harold's farm, Harold and Tyler in the lead, Ed following, Dale behind him, Pastor Williams and Nora bringing up the rear. They were going to war. And for the first time since that text message at the Red Oak Steakhouse, Harold Brennan felt like he might actually have a chance. The town hall parking lot was already half full when they arrived. Harold recognized most of the vehicles. Marcus's Lexus parked right up front like he owned the place, Linda's Honda beside it, and then a mix of trucks and sedans belonging to people Harold had known for decades. Some were here to support him, others were here for the show. Tyler squeezed Harold's shoulder. You ready? No, but let's go anyway. They walked in together, Harold, Tyler, Ed, Dale, Pastor Williams, and Nora. A unit. People turned to look, and Harold kept his eyes forward, back straight. Dale's old army jacket caught several gazes. The message was clear. Harold Brennan had served his country, and he wasn't rolling over now. The town hall smelled like old coffee and floor wax. Folding chairs filled the room in neat rows, and the 5 council members sat at a long table up front. Mayor Hendricks, 67, owned the pharmacy, presided with a gavel that looked older than the building itself. Marcus and Linda sat in the front row on the right side. Marcus in an expensive suit that screamed money. Linda wore new clothes Harold had never seen, her hair freshly done. She glanced back once, saw Harold, and quickly looked away. Harold's group took seats on the left side, third row. Strategic positioning, close enough to be seen, far enough back to not seem aggressive. A man in a plain suit sat in the back corner, notebook in hand. County Prosecutor Davis, if Harold had to guess, watching, recording. At 7 o'clock sharp, Mayor Hendricks banged his gavel. Town council meeting called to order. First item, petition for rezoning of the Brennan property, 200 acres on County Road 17, from agricultural to residential development. Petitioner Marcus Webb, you have the floor. Marcus stood smooth as oil. He walked to the front with a presentation board. Glossy, professional, expensive-looking, full-color renderings of houses and streets and a community pool. Mayor, council members, neighbors. Marcus's voice was confident, practiced. I'm here tonight to talk about opportunity, about growth, about bringing Riverside County into the 21st century. He set up his board. The renderings showed Brennan Ridge Estates, 47 homes, manicured lawns, families with children, all very pastoral and perfect. This development represents $15 million in investment. It will create 200 construction jobs over 2 years. It will add 47 families to our tax base. It will bring young people back to a county that's been shrinking for decades. Marcus gestured to the board. The Brennan property is prime land, flat, good drainage, highway access. It's been sitting unused while our young people move away because there's nowhere to live, nowhere to raise families. Harold's hands tightened on the evidence folder in his lap. Marcus continued. Now, I know change is hard. I know some folks think development means losing our rural character. But growth and character aren't mutually exclusive. This development will be tasteful, controlled, designed to blend with the landscape. And the economic benefits, increased tax revenue, new businesses, a larger customer base for our existing stores will help everyone. He looked directly at the council. I've already secured commitments from the properties south of Brennan's land. With or without Mr. Brennan's cooperation, development is coming to this area. The question is whether it happens in an organized, beneficial way, or whether we let one man's stubbornness create a patchwork mess. Marcus sat down. Several council members nodded. Harold could see it. They were buying it. Jobs, growth, progress. Who could argue with that? Mayor Hendricks looked at his notes. Mr. Brennan, you have 15 minutes to respond. Harold stood. His legs felt unsteady, but he walked to the front, set down his folder, looked at the faces staring back at him. Neighbors, strangers, people he'd known since childhood. He didn't have a glossy presentation, just papers and truth. My name is Harold Brennan. My father bought this land in 1952 with money he saved working double shifts at the mill. He raised me on it. I've worked it for 43 years. When my father died, he made me promise to keep the Brennan name on that land. His voice was rough but steady. Mr. Webb says I'm standing in the way of progress, that I'm stubborn. Maybe I am, but here's what he didn't tell you. Harold opened the folder. This is my signature on a deed of sale. He held up a document, except I never signed it. This signature is forged. I can prove it with handwriting analysis, and I will in court. Murmurs rippled through the room. Marcus's lawyer leaned in to whisper something. Marcus's face had gone tight. Harold continued. This is a bank account opened in my name and my wife's name 8 months ago. Joint account. I never knew about it. $50,000. Money my parents left for my grandson's education was transferred into this account and withdrawn systematically over 8 months. He held up the bank statements. Current balance? $238. That money was supposed to send Tyler to college. My parents worked their whole lives saving for their great-grandson. Mr. Webb and... Harold's voice caught. He steadied it. And my wife stole it. Linda's face had gone pale. She was staring at her hands. Now, Mr. Webb talks about opportunity and growth, but what he's really talking about is stealing a man's land through fraud and manipulation, and he's asking this council to help him do it by approving this rezoning. Harold set down the papers. I'm not against progress. I'm against theft, and I'm asking this council to see the difference. He started to sit down, but then Pastor Williams stood. Mayor Hendricks, if I may. The mayor looked surprised but nodded. Pastor Williams, you have the floor. Pastor Williams walked to the front, and Harold noticed he was carrying his briefcase, not a Bible, a briefcase. Something was about to happen. Thank you, Mayor. I'm Pastor Williams from First Methodist. I've known Harold Brennan for 40 years. He paused. I'm also Captain James Williams, retired, United States Marine Corps, Judge Advocate General Corps. I practiced military law for 12 years before entering the ministry. The room went silent. Pastor Williams opened his briefcase and pulled out documents. I've reviewed Mr. Brennan's case. The signature forgery is clear and prosecutable under state law. The unauthorized bank account constitutes financial fraud. The theft from a minor's education fund is a felony under the Elder and Dependent Adult Financial Abuse statute. He looked at Marcus. Mr. Webb, you mentioned this development is happening with or without Mr. Brennan's cooperation. That sounds very much like a threat. And threats made in the commission of fraud can elevate charges to racketeering. Marcus's lawyer was writing furiously now. Pastor Williams gestured to the back of the room. County Prosecutor Davis is here tonight as an observer. These aren't just civil matters anymore. There are criminal implications. The man in the back corner gave a slight nod. So when this council votes, Pastor Williams said, you're not just voting on rezoning, you're voting on whether to enable documented criminal activity. I've known Harold Brennan 40 years. I've known Marcus Webb 40 minutes. I know who I believe. He sat down. The silence in the room was absolute. Mayor Hendricks cleared his throat. Is there anyone else who wishes to speak? Ed Perkins stood up. I do. He walked to the front, no notes, just a man who'd lived in this town his whole life. I'm Ed Perkins. I've run the feed store for 37 years. I've known Harold since high school. I've done business with him for 4 decades. He turned to face the room. Harold Brennan's word is good. Always has been. If he says he didn't sign those papers, he didn't sign them. And I'll tell you something else. Marcus Webb's been in my store throwing money around, talking big about development, but when Harold needed fence staples and couldn't pay right away, I told him to pay when he could, because that's what neighbors do. Ed looked at the council. You approve this rezoning, you're not voting for progress. You're voting to help an outsider steal from one of our own. He sat down. Dale Rutherford stood next. Walked to the front in his old army jacket, unit patch visible. He didn't say much. Dale never did. Harold Brennan and I served together in Vietnam, Firebase Delta, 1971. When things got bad, Harold said we held. Dale's voice was gravelly, hard. We don't abandon position. We don't abandon brothers. I'm standing with Harold. He sat down. Then something happened that Harold hadn't expected. Mrs. Peterson from the Methodist Ladies Auxiliary stood up. I've known the Brennan family for 50 years. Harold's father was a good man. Harold's a good man. This isn't right. She sat. Then Tom Jenkins from the hardware store. Then the Chavez family who ran the Mexican restaurant. Then Sarah Miller, who taught 3rd grade. One by one, people stood. Didn't all speak, but they stood. A physical showing of support that filled the left side of the room. 12 people in total. Harold felt his throat tighten. He hadn't asked for this. Hadn't expected it. But here they were. People who could have stayed home, stayed silent, stayed safe, choosing to stand with him. Marcus's face had gone from confident to concerned. His lawyer was whispering urgently in his ear. Mayor Hendricks banged at his gavel. Order. We need to proceed with the vote. He looked at his fellow council members. The question before us is whether to approve the rezoning petition for the Brennan property. However, given the testimony about potential criminal activity, I'm inclined to table this matter until the legal issues are resolved. Mayor. Marcus stood abruptly. These are baseless accusations. A bitter old man trying to... Mr. Webb. Mayor Hendricks's voice went hard. You just heard testimony from a former JAG officer, supported by documented evidence, in the presence of a county prosecutor. I don't think baseless is the word I'd use. Marcus's jaw clenched. I'm calling for a vote, the mayor interrupted. All in favor of tabling the rezoning petition pending legal investigation? 4 hands went up immediately. Opposed? 1 hand, Councilman Roberts, who owned a construction company and had clearly been counting on the development contracts. Motion passes 4-1. Rezoning petition is tabled indefinitely. The gavel came down. Mr. Webb, I'd suggest you consult with your attorneys. And Mr. Brennan, the mayor's voice softened slightly. I'm sorry for what you've been through. The council will not be party to fraud. The meeting dissolved into murmurs. Marcus stood frozen for a moment, then grabbed his coat and stormed toward the door. His lawyer followed, trying to talk to him. Marcus shook him off. This isn't over, Marcus shouted back at the room. I've got lawyers. I've got resources. You think you've won? You haven't won anything. He slammed out of the building. Linda sat very still in her front row seat, staring at her hands. People were filing out around her, some glancing her way with expressions ranging from pity to contempt. She looked small suddenly, older. The expensive clothes couldn't hide how diminished she seemed. Harold stood, gathering his papers. Linda turned, caught his eye. For a long moment, they just looked at each other. 40 years of marriage, of breakfast tables and Christmas mornings and ordinary days, all of it ending in a town hall with witnesses and evidence folders. Linda opened her mouth like she was going to say something. Harold walked past her, Tyler at his shoulder, Ed and Dale flanking them. out into the parking lot where the March night was cold, but the stars were bright. "You did it," Tyler said, voice tight with emotion. "Grandpa, you actually did it." "But we did it," Harold corrected. He looked at the men around him. Ed, Dale, Pastor Williams, Nora standing by her car. Couldn't have done it alone. County Prosecutor Davis approached from the shadows. He was younger than Harold expected, maybe 50, with sharp eyes and a firm handshake. "Mr. Brennan, I'm Davis. Captain Williams and I served together." He glanced at Pastor Williams. "I've been taking notes. Based on what I heard tonight, my office will be opening an investigation into the financial fraud and forgery. I can't promise outcomes, but I can promise we'll look at this seriously. Thank you. One more thing." Davis pulled out a business card. "If Mr. Webb or anyone associated with him contacts you, threatens you, tries to intimidate you, you call me directly. Understood?" Harold took the card. "Understood." Davis nodded to the group and walked to his car. They stood in the parking lot for a few minutes, none of them quite ready to leave. The adrenaline was wearing off, leaving Harold shaky and exhausted. But underneath the exhaustion was something else. Something he hadn't felt in weeks. Hope. Not the fragile, desperate hope he'd felt when Linda apologized. This was different, harder, earned, built on truth and community and people who showed up when it mattered. "Come on," Ed said. "Coffee at the diner, my treat." They piled into trucks, Harold and Tyler, Ed, Dale, Pastor Williams, and Nora, a small convoy heading to the 24-hour diner on Route 9, where they'd drink bad coffee and replay the meeting and start figuring out what came next. As they pulled out of the parking lot, Harold glanced back. Linda was still sitting in her car, alone, engine running but not moving, just sitting there in the dark. Harold turned forward and didn't look back again. The diner coffee was terrible, but nobody cared. They sat in the back booth, Harold, Tyler, Ed, Dale, Pastor Williams, and Nora, replaying the meeting, laughing at Marcus's tantrum, trying to process what had just happened. "Did you see Roberts' face when the vote went 4-1? Ed grinned. "Thought he had that development contract locked up." Marcus's lawyer looked ready to have a stroke, Dale added. But Harold was quiet, staring into his coffee. Tyler noticed. "You okay, Grandpa?" Harold nodded slowly. "Just thinking, this isn't over. Marcus will appeal. Linda will file for divorce, claim half of everything. Even with the fraud charges, the legal bills are going to be massive." Sarah Chen had warned him about this. Winning the council vote was just the first battle. The war would drag on. Depositions, hearings, motions, appeals. Marcus had money to burn. Harold had a farm that barely broke even most years. Pastor Williams set down his coffee. "Then we keep fighting, one day at a time." "And Harold," Nora said quietly, "you're not paying for all this alone. I've got some savings. Nothing fancy, but it's yours if you need it." I can't." "You can and you will." Her voice was firm. "What's money for if not helping someone who needs it?" Ed nodded. "I'm in too, whatever you need." Harold looked at these people, some he'd known for decades, some like Nora who'd become allies in crisis, and felt something shift in his chest. He'd spent weeks feeling isolated, convinced he was fighting alone, but he'd never been alone. The support had always been there, waiting for him to accept it. "Thank you," he said, and his voice cracked slightly. "All of you." They sat there until the coffee ran out, and the waitress started giving them looks. When they finally left, the night was colder, but clearer. Stars stretched overhead in patterns Harold's father had taught him to read. 2 weeks later, Linda's lawyer called Harold's lawyer. Divorce papers were filed. Linda was asking for half of the farm's value, half of the remaining bank accounts, and spousal support. Sarah Chen didn't seem surprised. "We'll counter." With the fraud charges pending, the forged signatures, the stolen education fund, her claim to half the assets is compromised. "But Harold, this will take time. Months, maybe a year. How much will I lose?" Sarah was quiet for a moment. "The farm? You'll keep it? The fraud is too clear. But cash assets, savings, retirement accounts, she's got legal claim to half of those. You'll walk away with the land, but probably not much else." So Harold would be land rich and cash poor. 68 years old with 200 acres and a mortgage that still had 12 years on it. But the land would stay Brennan land. The promise to his father would hold. That was enough. Marcus Webb left town 3 weeks after the council meeting. His development company was under investigation by the county, the state attorney general, and the IRS. The local paper ran a story about fraud allegations and forged documents. His reputation, locally at least, was destroyed. Harold heard through Ed that Marcus was threatening lawsuits, claiming defamation, promising to come back and finish what he started. But his Lexus never appeared in Riverside County again. And after a while, the threats stopped. Some enemies defeated themselves with their own arrogance. By mid-April, Tyler had officially transferred to the community college. He moved into his old room at the farmhouse, took a part-time job at Ed's feed store, and started taking over more of the farm work. Harold tried to protest, but Tyler just shook his head. "This is what I want, Grandpa. College is still happening, just here instead of there. And I'm learning things school can't teach me." They worked to the fence line together one Saturday morning, spring finally winning its war against winter. The snow was gone, replaced by mud and the first green shoots of new grass. Meadowlarks called from the posts, the air smelled like thaw and possibility. "You ever regret it?" Tyler asked while they were replacing wire. "Fighting instead of just selling, taking the money, moving on?" Harold straightened, looked at the land stretching out around them. "Every day I think about how much easier it would have been to quit, how much money I'd have saved in legal fees, how much pain I'd have avoided. But I made a promise. And keeping promises is what separates men from boys, what separates character from convenience." Harold turned to his grandson. "You're going to face times in your life when doing the right thing costs more than doing the easy thing. What you learn from watching me, from all of this, is that the cost is worth it. Not because you always win, but because you can live with yourself after." Tyler nodded slowly, and Harold could see the boy really understanding, really taking it in. This was the lesson that mattered more than any college fund. That a man's word means something, that dignity can't be stolen, only surrendered, that standing up beats rolling over even when standing hurts. They finished the fence as the sun climbed higher, warming their backs. Tyler's truck was parked by the barn next to Harold's, 2 generations of Brennans, working the land together. Nora waved from her kitchen window. Harold waved back. The house was quiet now. Just Harold and Tyler, no wife, no partner, no companion, after 40 years. Some nights the silence pressed down heavy. Some mornings Harold woke up and for 3 seconds forgot Linda was gone, reached for her in the bed, and found empty space. But there was a difference between loneliness and solitude, and Harold was learning to tell them apart. Loneliness was the first few weeks, desperate, aching, convinced he'd die alone and forgotten. Solitude was now, peaceful, chosen, sufficient. He missed companionship, but he didn't miss the betrayal. He missed who Linda used to be, but he didn't miss who she'd become. The divorce would be final by summer. Sarah Chen said the settlement was fair. Harold kept the land. Linda took the cash assets in her car. Tyler's college fund was being restored through a legal judgment, paid from the recovered fraud proceeds. Marcus's company was liquidating assets to cover penalties, and Tyler was first in line for restitution. It wasn't everything, but it was justice. Early May morning, before the sun climbed high enough to burn off the dew, Harold sat on his porch with coffee in a chipped mug, watching Tyler's truck come up the gravel drive. The young man, had been in town picking up lumber for the barn repairs. Harold's father's pocket watch sat warm in his palm. He'd wound it that morning, same as every morning, feeling the weight of 3 generations of Brennan men. His grandfather had carried this watch. His father. Now him, someday Tyler. The land stretched out before him, fence lines solid, fields ready for planting. Red barns still needing paint but standing. 200 acres of creek bottom and timber, held through fraud and betrayal and divorce and public humiliation. Held because a promise made at a deathbed mattered more than comfort, more than money, more than an easy exit. Tyler parked by the barn, waved. Harold waved back. The meadowlarks were singing, same song they'd sung every spring since Harold was a boy, learning these fields. Spring peepers called from the creek marsh. The coffee in his hand was still hot, steam rising in the cool air. Harold's face in the bathroom mirror that morning had shown a man older than 68, lines deeper, hair grayer, eyes carrying weight they hadn't carried 6 months ago. But those eyes were clear. No shame in them. No regret about the fight he'd chosen. He'd lost a wife, lost his savings, lost the easy retirement he'd imagined, fishing trips and grandchildren and growing old with a partner. But he'd kept his word, kept his dignity, kept the land, and taught his grandson that some things matter more than comfort, that character costs something but the price is worth paying. The land endures, the promise kept. And the man who stands on it at sunrise, coffee in hand and work ahead, knows the difference between what he's lost and what he's kept. That knowing, that's the victory. Tyler walked toward the porch, young and strong and learning what manhood actually means, not through lectures or sermons, but through watching an old man stand when standing was the hardest thing he'd ever done. Harold stood too, pocketed his father's watch and headed toward the barn. There was work to do. There was always work to do, and that in its own way was a blessing.